Pablo,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Hello.
How are you?
Good. I'm never sure when I'm being hacked these days. So it's good to be on with you. Are we live?
We are live. This is
Amazing.
Nothing
Okay.
Personal. You are live on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel. And then we will be on the DraftKings network starting at 8 a.m. every day. So you are everywhere as you are promoting and talking about the things that you are finding out. And I can't even let a minute go by without talking about your episode last week, not to mention the fact that I was on it, but I was on it. But it was your show, your episode, and you've created quite a storm around Kawhi Leonard and the Los Angeles Clippers. How did you know before we went on air? Because I didn't know squat, as you saw in that episode when you surprised me with crap. But were you surprised at the legs that this story is having?
Absolutely. I was in my head trying to triangulate, okay, where is this going to fit into just like the stuff that the algorithm cottons to? And I had this certainly below Jordan Hudson and Bill Belichick, which was like a step change for us when we did that episode on PTFO. That one had lots of sort of like broad appeal characters. It was self-evidently kind of like tabloid in a way that I was self-conscious about, which is its own conversation. This I was concerned. I mean, look, part of the reason I needed you beyond the fact that you're so good in the role that you have, talking about sports and business, I needed you because I needed to explain complicated, seemingly arcane details about not just business, but like carbon credits. Like we made a carbon offset centric episode, like the number one story in sports, which I think is a testament to just how you do complicated stories in a way that feel fun and, like there's some entertainment value as opposed to just like here's a very academic study. And so for those reasons I was shocked that non-basketball fans would care about this story in the way that they clearly have to get the metrics the way that they wound up being. I was totally floored by that.
Because did you get non-football fans to care about the NFL collusion grievance in your
We
mind?
we
Because you got
did.
non-NFL fans to think about Jordan Hudson, that's for sure.
Yeah, the NFLPA. So the three sort of like big, broad national stories. There are three or four, but the NFLPA is the last series, the ongoing series that we devoted really a lot of energy and reporting resources to, and that one did get attention beyond the NFL, but it felt fairly contained relative to this one, to the sport it's about. I think people saw this one. I mean, there are a couple of things about it. I think, and we were intentional about this, right? Establish that the comedy of this is that this was a no-show job involving lots of A-list celebrities who did actual jobs. That's why we led with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert Downey Jr. and Drake and Orlando Bloom and so on and so on. So you get that part. And then you're like, here's the one of the 10 richest men in the world, who's the richest owner in all of sports, who is now, and this is where the proof is in this pudding. When Steve Ballmer flies to Bristol, Connecticut to do the ESPN interview in Bristol, he flies to them. The mountain flies to them. It's unbelievable. I mean, from a pure, just like, okay, the story is real in every way now, in ways that I didn't even anticipate.
So let's just rewind and explain to people what you're talking about. The story about Kawhi Leonard and about the possible salary cap circumvention by the Clippers based on an endorsement deal that Kawhi Leonard did with a company that ends up being, side note, a scam company, fraud galore. And
Ponzi
side
scheme. Yeah.
note, Kawhi Leonard didn't do anything to get the money. Side note, Kawhi Leonard got paid more money than people you've heard of, and money like 28 million bucks. That's an outrageous amount of money. Then this goes viral to non-NBA fans, and my test is I've got 4 or 5 good friends who are not sports fans, and they haven't heard of 98% of the stuff that I talk about. When I ask them, hey, what about this story? And they know about it, that's a test that you have transcended sports. But then the next day, Steve Ballmer shows up and does a 16-minute and 42-second interview with Ramona Shelburne that we covered here on Nothing Personal in great detail. What I didn't know is that he flew to Bristol to do it. I thought they did it out of ESPN LA, even though it doesn't exist anymore, because that's where Steve is. So do you know that for a fact that he schlepped on Air Ballmer to come to Bristol?
I mean, I don't think he flew commercial. Bristol notably doesn't have a national airport. I'm not even sure if Bristol has a regional airport. So I know it was in Bristol for a fact. Absolutely. Look, the question, the supposition you made is the appropriate one, which is he's in LA, we presume. Like they have crews in LA. Like, why would you go to Bristol? Which reflects, I think, something about what he wanted and how he wanted to communicate it. And I don't want to get into this all the way here just because, I still have some more reporting to do on it. But what it reflects is a level of urgency and a level of desire to be in a setting in which there would be some semblance of maximum persuasion. And he didn't want to do it over Zoom, clearly. And he was willing to play a road game, as it were.
So,
And
Pablo,
that,
you've had
yeah, go
two
ahead.
reactions, though, to some of the big stories you've had. Jordan Hudson, after your Belichick Hudson stories, she went one direction, and it was really, hey, I don't know who this Pablo guy is, but he's lying. He's a POS. And her responses were not really responding to the facts of the case. They were not responding to your story. It was more responding to you personally. The
Yes.
NFL collusion grievance story, the responses were actions that were done by the underlying entities. So you had movement in the union when Howell was removed, however you want to say he was removed, and
Yep.
Treader lost his job. And that was a direct result of your reporting, but it was not an anti-Pablo crusade. That's not what they did. What have you seen after this story? You started with you're worried that your computer is getting hacked. So I assume that is a reflection of your concern that some entity, unless you were joking, but which you may or may not have been, that's the beauty of you, but what has been the reaction you've received of this story about Kawhi Leonard versus the first two that I'm using as a frame of reference?
Yeah, so just on the mainstream, main street level of like just anecdote, nothing's resonated like this. People coming to me and saying, I just heard these people talk about this thing. I just heard blah, blah, blah. Again, along the lines of what you experience anecdotally. So I experienced that. Then there is the level of like, okay, so they're going to talk about me in a way that is very clear. In that interview, Pablo's podcast comes up over and over again. I am proud to be a podcaster for the record, so all good. But the thing about this one and how it fits into that through line of like, why am I joking that my computer is being hacked? Why am I now increasingly trying to be on radar, frankly, for strange things happening? Is because and this is serious, whether or not they are happening, I have been just like noticing some things. And, I hand up full self awareness. They may be nothing, they may be something. And I'm not saying that they're Steve Ballmer. I'm saying that this actually started earlier with those other stories, not Jordan Hudson, but with the NFLPA stuff, especially, and then the NBA gambling one. I mean, now we're in the realm, by the way. The reason those three stories, and we'll leave Jordan Hudson off to the side here, those three stories, NFLPA, NBA gambling, with Malik Beasley, and this one, the reason they all make me think that there is a different sort of crackling, almost electrical energy that I think I'm hearing sometimes on phone calls as well as in the air, is because those are things involving active federal investigations. That's Department of Justice and the FBI. In the case of this story, this is the SEC and the CFTC as well. In the aspiration story, so these are things that have a level of, frankly, seriousness inside of which we are finding all of the fun and entertainment. But we're doing the thing where we are able to laugh because we've reported out the parts that are hilarious, like genuinely funny, which is why I love these stories. And at the same time, these are things in which we are also actively uncovering information that I believe the federal government does not always know. And that's the crazy dance that we do on the show. And I'm surprising you in a mystery box is sometimes also a party that is discovering things for the first time. Not always, but I will say there are definite examples in which they did not know something that we had. The federal government is also looking what's inside that box, and I am trying to be, also respectful and reasonable about what that means and what I'm asking for.
Do you have a concern with these investigations that you're doing? Because it really is investigative journalism now. Do you have a concern when you are digging into where the federal government and where there are criminal issues on people misunderstanding and mixing the two up? Because I got that a couple times this week. You are not alleging a crime or proving or disproving a crime committed as it relates to salary circumvention. And that is very clear. That is not what the SEC is looking into. That is not illegal. It's a violation of the NBA rule, but it's a very big difference. But if you're talking about you helping or potentially having a box that the government's interested in, the government's not interested in salary cap circumvention. So you've got things that you think the government's interested in as it relates to fraud of the company aspiration.
Well, I think the question I'll keep this general for the time being, but with the full awareness that, of course, like the NBA, it's funny, and this gets to the question of punishment and what is the NBA going to do? That is a fake justice system. We're talking now about the real justice system. The thing that I have found at every sort of turn in a story like this one is that I am not alleging that Steve Ballmer should go to jail or anything like it. What I am alleging is that there are bits of information and people that I have been speaking to who have a question that can only reasonably be impacted by this larger investigation of what did Steve Ballmer know and when did he know it. And so I'm not saying that he did anything. I am saying that if he has some influence over a company that turns out to be a Ponzi scheme, while also himself being defrauded and a victim of that Ponzi scheme, which per my reporting seems clear to me that he was in fact victimized by Joe Sandberg, who has pled guilty to wire fraud and is currently, in the justice system in ways that you can go and see and look up. I think that's true. The question, though, that other people have at the company is if Steve Ballmer was also getting something that he wanted in the fake justice system world, what does that say about his information in general? And that is their question. I am not saying that I have the evidence that would put Steve Ballmer in prison in the least. I might dare say I might have led with that if I had it in our episode. I don't have that. But I do have people asking questions because their experience suggests that some people at this company and some investors of this company knew more than others about things that may not be criminal, but were nonetheless kept secret. And that is where I think there is a pretty messy, blurred line around the question of who knew what and when.
How disappointed do you get when basically your competition or other people in the media who I assume you could be friends with are doing shows and all of them are talking about this topic and your show and mentioning your show and almost unanimously are saying, yeah, that Cuban guy, I think he got it right. There's really nothing to see here. I don't really see any punishment happening. Do you get upset by that? If you had an agenda or a thought that you wanted to see this end with punishment, or do you actually love what people are saying because it opens the door for you to potentially say more?
Yeah, I want everybody to say what they think. Just say what you think. And then as time goes on, we can adjudicate what you thought and why you thought it, how you thought it, and whether you should still think it. Look, I'm somebody who fundamentally is grateful, like genuinely thankful that people are talking about this. So whatever you got, we live in an era where beggars can't be choosers and we're all beggars, right? Please talk about us. Please, we're all panhandlers. Not above that, totally get it. It helps, frankly. At the same time, the only thing I want, my only agenda is please, on that same note, please listen to the episode. Just listen to it. Like, it's not just the clip. I know, and again, I'm not going to shake my fist at clouds here. Just listen to the episode. Like, the episode is an hour and 20 minutes long, and it's meticulously crafted in all the ways that involve flying Amin Al Hassan into New York and bringing David Samson in and surprising them, but also giving us time in studio. And this is the other funny thing, and the dance we do, in which I understand why maybe it's not always clear, just on this specific point, that we are kind of like chat show, talking head style live reacting, but we tape for a lot longer than we air. And so the question of like what makes it in is not sloppy, it is meticulous sloppiness. And so just know that if it makes it in, it made it in for a reason, right? These are edited. It made it in for a reason. So please watch the episode because I think a lot of questions that I get frustrated by, I believe at least get answered in the episode, almost always. And so whenever someone doesn't seem to reflect that they watched it, I'm like, that's the least you can do if you're going to talk about it. Now, also understand an hour and 20 minutes is a long ass time. So I get it. To get to my next sort of like just frustration, I guess, if now I may reveal that I have some of them. The frustration I have is if you didn't do reporting on this, but you're speaking very confidently and you're showing your ass and you may not realize it, just know that it's obvious to people who did do the reporting, you know? So,
So, Pablo, movies have trailers, and the equivalency to me is a clip that you choose to release about an episode and then release it on social media and then wonder why people make a decision on whether they want to watch the movie based on the trailer. That is very much the world we live in, where we take clips of our
yeah.
shows and we try to convert people from watching the clip into watching the show, but way more people watch the clip than the show. And so the reason I think you're sort of pounding your fist at clouds is you are participating in a way of panhandling that has been going on long before podcasts. It's all the previews, all the trailers. How about the people who write the book summary on the flap of the book as a way to get you to read the book, and people read that in the airport and they're like, not interested, and they don't buy the book. You've got that 4 minutes, or you've got that 2.5 minutes, or that 1 page of a book to get somebody. So ostensibly, you're doing your best to get people to watch the episode from your clip. Is that how you look at it?
Oh yeah, and look, I want to be clear. Like two things are true, right? With the trailer, which is the best I think analogy for it, is we released this 5 minute clip on Twitter. Let's just pick that as the platform. I didn't check this morning. Last I checked, it was like viewed by 32 million people, right? So amazing success. The conversion rate to the YouTube video, and there's also audio and all that. So I'm not going to even add those, but just like for the YouTube video, we were at, I don't know, 350 something thousand views for the full video. So amazing success, fractional disappointing failure given that amazing success on just this mathematical basis. At the same time, it's objectively the most popular episode we've ever done on YouTube. So like all of this is simultaneously true. And I complain about none of this from the perspective of, ooh, I wish I had more. I think what I am really feeling is just, if you're going to talk about this and weigh in on it from a national media perspective, I just feel like we're taking an IQ test. And I maybe that's mean, but I just feel like if you were to, I don't know, I think in some ways the Main Street sort of setting is pretty useful here. It's sort of like if you were to tell someone this story, here are the basic facts. All you need to know is this series of things. And also, by the way, you should know that yes, team sponsorships do exist, where players get deals from sponsors that are also advertising with their employer. That is also true. Yes, you can provide all these caveats. And yet, the question is, do you think this met the standard? According to the collective bargaining agreement, which should also be, in that same exact way, a caveat provided for people, right? If you're going to talk about team sponsorships being common, maybe also point out that the NBA CBA, as you have talked about, David, is not merely direct evidence, but circumstantial evidence, which is to say that we have an hour and 20 minutes of, I don't know what you would call it, but something pretty
Somewhere
clearly
between
in between
circumstantial and
those
actual.
things. Paper,
Because
like
when you showed me the
contracts.
contract, I mean,
Yes.
Pablo, I saw the contract with my own two eyes for $28 million. And I cannot believe the number of people I have seen online. And I guess it's not national. I mean, anybody with a microphone can say anything and be an expert in whatever they want to be because you can be self-proclaimed expert at anything. But for anyone to confuse the fact that a team sponsor doing a deal with one of its players looks like that Kawhi deal has never looked at any deals done with players to team sponsors ever. There's
And
never
and
been a deal like this one.
no, never. And by the way, this is like bigger than his New Balance contract, I am told. Just a sense of like scale, multiples bigger than any equivalent kind of deal in that genre. And so I guess the next step is if you are hearing from people who are saying this is normal, I ask you, as someone with the, not you specifically, but the royal you, I ask those people if their radar is functioning. Like,
It's a
why
great
would they
question.
be telling you that? Because it's just absurd. And I guess that's the thing about like, because I think about this a lot actually. Like, and this is the question you started with, what does it take to make a difference? What does it take to make an impact? And in this case, I do fear sometimes that we put so much into this that it was too much for people to totally like absorb. Um, I think in some ways it's also a function of just like memory and the internet and the way that everything is fleeting, right? It's all constantly disappearing. But the question of circumstantial evidence as a concept is like, ooh, here are some suspicious things that happened that suggest that another suspicious thing happened. I got over 3,000 pages of documents, including the contract that was signed and executed, as well as 7 sources who worked at the company. But bank statements, all that stuff. Like the obtaining of the documents, I just think we are, if you're going to call that all circumstantial, and maybe it's not direct in the Glenn Taylor, Joe Smith way, in which there's a contract that basically says Glenn's secret contract for Joe Smith and it's signed. I just also wonder if people realize that the basic minimum threshold of not even competence, but like a pulse, if you're trying to get away with this, is to not write it down like that. And so once you proceed with that as the modicum of just like brainwave you gotta have, what plausibly could you discover that would ever count as direct is the question that I think we very almost unprecedentedly comprehensively answered, and yet questions remain. So, there's that.
And the NBA acknowledges this because the collective bargaining agreement specifically talks about the fact that circumstantial evidence is enough to show salary circumvention. So it literally contemplates exactly what you're saying when what people, so-called experts, are saying is, oh, it's 7 sources, that's it, they're all from inside the company, what do they know? They're totally unreliable.
Can I address that very briefly as well, David? Not to just steamroll your generosity, but like the people I talk to, do these, again, this is where I'm just like, it's an IQ test. Do these people think that I'm talking to the scammers? Like, maybe my failure was to say, and none of my 7 sources is going to jail, or none of my 7 sources has pled guilty. And I feel comfortable declaring that now. My sources are not Joe Sandberg or Ibrahim Al-Husseini, who's the other guy who pled guilty in that scheme with Joe. These are people that I stake my reputation on. And so the question then for me and how I vet is, how can I cross-check whether what they say is true? And that's why I took 7 months to do this, and why there are 7 of them, which is, by the way, like more than typically is required, right, to go with something. But at the same time, what I also demanded was like the highest, because again, I'm not, look, the show is not called Pablo Torre is right. The show is Pablo Torre finds out. So I will get things wrong at some point, I am sure. I am sure of it. But what I try to do is avoid it, David. And so anyway, last thing is just on that. And that's why I needed the documents. And that's why the documents are in the episode.
And can I assume that there will be a follow-up? How does that work in your mind? When do you decide? Last question, and I know you got to go because you're finding stuff out, and thank you for your time. But how do you decide when a follow-up is necessary?
So it's a very good question. So it took 7 months to do this one. And I just want to tamper everyone's expectations. It took 7 months to cross the threshold of publishing. Now, Mark Cuban gets on Twitter and he wants to have an argument. The reason I respond to that in minutes, and we published that on the Friday after we put that one, episode 1 on Wednesday, is because relatedly, I'd spent 7 months reporting and understanding the story. I would love to talk about what we had reported on Wednesday with anybody in Eddie's setting under any amount of spotlight that you got. I mean, frankly, I just assume that people will not care about this at some point. At the moment, I'm the world's foremost expert on this topic, and it is fleeting as well. So in the meantime, if you want to talk about it, let me know. The next thing, though, what I will simply say is that these things require an amount of diligence and time. And I just think that if and when I do a follow up, just know that we'll have met every standard of scrutiny and fact checking and legal vetting before we release it. And so, you know, I don't want people to expect. We released an episode today that was an interview, which I loved, with the greatest streaker of all time. I love this guy, Mark Roberts. That was today's episode. Yeah, we got to do other stuff too. So I just want to temper expectations while also clearly admit, of course, I'm still interested in this story and there's more to discover.
So tune in to Pablo Torre Finds Out. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. You can go to its own YouTube channel. He is doing things, as Dan Le Batard likes to say, that no one else is doing. I say it very differently. He's doing things that everybody else is trying to do but not able to do. Pablo Torre, my friend and a friend of the show, thank you for your time. I'm available, and I have no sources that are telling me anything, so I can't imagine if I'm of use to you, but I'd like to be.
David, the reason you keep on popping up on my show is that you are the one. I mean, and this is maybe an insult the way I'm going to say it. You're one of the most useful people I've ever met.